new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire, the no-show. Who set you back because they didn't show up on day one, or day two, or ever again. And now your product launch is delayed because you're talking to alien abduction podcasters to track them down. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can help make sure your next hire sticks. In fact, businesses who use LinkedIn are 24% less likely to reopen a role in the next 12 months. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
Welcome to The Modern Taoist with Kit Mann. Ancient wisdom, modern life, and the way. Join the free Modern Taoist community on Patreon at patreon.com/themoderntaoist or visit the website at dawananda.com. And now, The Modern Taoist.
Well, hello and thanks for joining. Welcome once again to The Modern Taoist. In this episode, my name is Kit Mann, and I've got a weird confession for you. First of all, I want to talk about two questions that we got this week because they made me chuckle. The first question that came in early in the week was, why should I waste my time going to Patreon? That was the question. You certainly don't have to. If you view it to be a waste of time, please do not participate. It's actually pretty simple. I get what the question was, though, because I think they think it's just another thing for people to do, and people are getting exhausted about that. Patreon exists differently than it used to. For us, it is not a paid service. It is a place where we are developing our own little sort of social media network where only listeners of this podcast can chat and get together. It's still budding. It's still building. There's stuff going on there, but it's not as consistent as it will be. Get in on the ground floor. Go check it out. It's patreon.com/themoderntaoist. And the other funny question that we got this week was, why do you have a rattlesnake at the beginning of your music? And I had to think about that one for a minute. It's not a rattlesnake. But thank you for those questions. And now I'm going to tell you my confession. As I record this, it is 12:35 on midnight, Monday night, early Tuesday morning. And this podcast has to be ready to be uploaded in 4.5 hours. And I had another one completely done, edited. Well, not edited because I don't edit, obviously, but written and recorded. And it was scheduled to start at 5 a.m., just like they always do. And I could not get out of my mind all night long, all day long after I recorded the episode yesterday. I could not get out of my mind that it didn't feel right. And it sat on me and it wore on me a bit. I'm going to be honest with you. It didn't feel right. And the reason that it didn't feel right, I discovered, was that I had written it with my head and not necessarily with my heart. I had written an episode about how to be a good person. And from the moment I finished recording, I thought to myself, that I don't think I conveyed what I wanted to convey. And it bothered me all day. So as any good Taoist would do, I scrapped it. Because if it's not right, it's not right. And I was trying to think of another topic. I've always got topics in my head and floating around, and what do I want to talk about? And I was trying to think of what I should do instead, because that one's clearly not ready for me to convey that message to you, because I don't have it. It's not coming from my heart. And then it dawned on me the other day on Sunday, I had the thought that I heard somebody say, I'm winning the day. And it felt so fake to me when they said it. It felt like they were convincing themselves that they're winning the day. And then that led me to another kind of question in my head of people feeling like they need to win every day or fill the day with something, and how much that can wear us out. Because we can get worn out between expecting a day to go a certain way and then how it actually goes, right? We talk about expectation all the time. You have a plan or a rough sense of how things should go, and then life produces something different. Very much like me having a plan and a rough sense of how the podcast episode should go, and I produced something different. I produced something that was it was a little too hard for me. And I don't mean hard as in difficult, I mean hard as in hardened. And sometimes that happens in life. We produce different things than we think we're going to. Something that required everything that you had just to get through it without losing ground. And now, at the end of it, instead of feeling satisfaction of a day well spent, you feel something closer to failure, like I did with the podcast episode. Instead of being satisfied that I put in the work and did an hour-long podcast that would probably be fine and be received fine, it felt to me like failure. It felt like I fell short. Part of that is expectation. Part of it is that I approached it in a way that I rarely do. I approached it from a point of sitting down to write an episode about this topic rather than letting the topic come to me. Sort of like writing a song. Most songwriters don't sit down and say, today I'm going to write a song about boy meets girl, girl hates boy, boy drives off into the sunset. That's not how songs are written, right? The strange thing is, like I said, you probably did fine on those days. The podcast episode that I was going to give you was fine. You probably did exactly what you were required to do that day when you feel like something was off. But we apply a measuring stick that isn't calibrated properly because we calibrate for what we expect. We calibrate for what we want to happen. And so a day that deserved to be called maybe an act of endurance got filed under disappointing performance, a failed attempt at having a day. And this happens constantly to most people. We talk about burnout and stress and the pressures of modern life, but we rarely talk about the specific grinding weight that comes from applying the wrong metric to your own existence. It comes from grading every day as a win or a loss when the day itself had no interest in being either one of those things. When the day is simply asking you to be in it, to move through it, to come out the other side standing. And you did that, and then you felt like a failure anyway. The grading system that we carry is very rarely something we choose. It is an accumulation from years of being evaluated. You began being evaluated when you're 4 or 5 years old. Before that, even. You're on a scale of when you should have accomplished something. Should have learned to talk by now. Should have potty trained by now. Then you get into school and everything is an evaluation. Then you get out of school and you get into work and that's an evaluation. Families communicate love through your performance and approval of achievement. And so this runs automatically. And it has run in you for so long that most people experience it not as a system that they're operating, but as an objective description of how things actually are. Not, am I judging this day harshly? Just, today was a bad day. It feels like a fact rather than a choice. And this episode is about choice. I want to make it about what becomes available when the grading system gets examined rather than you. And about this radical idea that I have that we don't have to win every day. Some days aren't for winning. We're never going to be for winning. And I want you to learn to recognize which kind of day you might be in before you judge the outcome. Most people have, without ever consciously deciding to, most people have developed an internal performance review that runs continually and evaluates everything. It just runs. And at the end of the day, or at some point during the day, or first thing in the morning, you're already calculating whether you're on track. Good day or bad day. Productive or wasted. Moving forward or falling behind. And to you, this feels like a reality, right? But this isn't reality. It's a judgment framework that God installed at some point and has been applying a standard that was developed for one set of circumstances and then expecting all circumstances to fit into the framework. I'm not going to lie to you, this largely comes from school. This is where it is built, where every single day is an evaluation, where you are scored every day. And these scores are accumulated into a letter value or a number value as a picture of your worth. And then, as I said earlier, it proceeds from there to work, where your performance is currency. Visibility is survival. And the implicit message, in fact, sometimes the explicit message, is that your value is directly proportional to your output. And if work and school wasn't enough, we have now added our social life, where everyone online is optimizing and progressing and achieving and launching things and completing things and documenting their improvement. And the gap between your interior life and other people's curated exteriors is gigantic. It's gigantic enough that it produces this low-grade sense of falling behind, people that you've never actually competed with and don't need to compete with. From the self-improvement industry, which has made an extraordinary business out of the proposition that you are a project in permanent need of development. And that any day not spent actively developing yourself is somehow misused. So this framework, you can see, is literally, and I mean that not figuratively, it is literally everywhere. And it produces a relationship to time. A relationship in which every unit of time is supposed to be generating something. Progress, growth, learning, improvement, connection. Any day that doesn't produce one of these is a lost day. And the person who had that day is responsible for the losing. What this framework can't accommodate, that it has no category for, is the day that was simply just hard. When circumstances happen, things arrive, and they weren't circumstances that responded to effort or optimism or good planning. It was just a crappy day. The day where someone you love was struggling and you sat with them through it, not fixing anything, just being there, which is exhausting sometimes and necessary. Or a day where your body decided it was done, regardless of what you had scheduled. Or a day where everything could go sideways, and it did. And you managed it as well as you could have managed it. Nothing was accomplished except that the situation didn't get any worse. Sometimes that happens. And what do? We grade that system as that was a failure, that was an F. Because the grading system only knows success. And a crappy day ain't it. Right? I got news for you. Human life is not a performance system. It is a living, fluctuating roller coaster. And living things do not operate on linear upward trajectories. They have rhythm. They build and they rest. They move forward and they integrate. They sustain damage and they repair it. Think about the seasons. Some are for growth, spring. Some are for survival, summer. Some are for resting, fall. And some are for turning off, winter. This is not a design flaw. This is biology. This is ecology. This is the way everything alive works. And the one thing it categorically is not is a straight line consistently growing upward. Now, I want you to put that grading system topic into another context. Grading systems are designed for machines because it assumes consistent input means consistent output. That effort is always the correct intervention, and that any result short of maximum available is a shortfall. And as we have said before, and we had a whole episode about you are not a machine. Your life is not a machine. And the mismatch between those two things, the expectation of performing like a machine, the way the grading system is designed, and what you are applying that grading system to, is costing you something real. Because it's making you form a verdict about yourself that you didn't earn and you don't deserve. So we have to reframe. The reframe that we do is very simple, but it is very genuinely difficult to apply because applying it requires you overriding a very deeply conditioned set of assumptions about what a day is supposed to produce. Some days are building days. The energy is there. The clarity is there. The conditions are right and the momentum is real. You can push forward, you can create, you can advance, you can make things happen. These are the days in the productivity framework that it was designed for. And on these days, that framework works reasonably well, right? So what do? Use them. Engage them fully. Don't waste a building day on low-level tasks that can wait. Don't squander the energy when it's genuinely available. That is how you begin the reframe. If you are on, if you have it that day, if you are buzzing, start buzzing, cousin. Do the big things. Don't waste it on the little things. Because building days are not every day. And treating every day as though it should be a building day, or worse, measuring yourself against a building day on a regular day, is one of the more reliable ways to ensure that you will have fewer building days available over time. So on the building days, build. Some days are recovery days. Something has been depleted, not just physical energy in the simple sense of energy, but the kind of inner resources that we have that sustained effort draws on and that genuine rest replenishes. Maybe it was a hard week that finally caught up on a Thursday. Maybe a really tough conversation took more out of you than you expected. Maybe you've been running at high output for long enough that the system says, hey, yo, we need a break. We need a rest day. We need a recovery day. That is not a failed building day. Two different things. We try to frame recovery day as a failed building day. It's not. It's its own thing. It's a recovery day. It's a different kind of day entirely with a different purpose and a completely different measure of success. Success on recovery day is simple. Did you recover? Did you rest in a way that restored something rather than resting in a guilty way while simultaneously beating yourself up for failing to build? But what you do then is if you beat yourself up on a recovery day, you fail to build and you fail to recover because you didn't commit to either one. Do you see what I'm saying? Most people know this version of the failed recovery day intimately. You know you're depleted. You know you need rest, but your grading system, your measuring stick, your analytics are still running, telling you that rest is laziness. Tasks are waiting. Everybody else is moving forward while you're sitting still. So you attempt a diminished, dumbed-down version of productivity, but you're too tired to do it well, but you're too guilty to stop trying. And you're arriving at the end of the day more depleted than you were when you started, and you got nothing to show for the effort. The worst possible outcome is failing at both at the same time. You produce entirely by applying the wrong metric to a day that was asking you to do something specific. Because the person who fully recovers today has more available tomorrow. The person who halfway works through the day today arrives at work tomorrow more depleted than before, and the day after that, and eventually to a point where there's nothing left to push through. And I'm not talking about, when I say work, I don't mean work at a job. I mean work with what you've got to do throughout the day. Sometimes it's job, sometimes it's house, sometimes it's taking care of family members, sometimes it's taking care of yourself, but it all feels like work if you're not recovered. So we have building day and we have recovery day, but there's one more. Endurance days. Endurance days are the ones where the grading system has no clue what's going on. It doesn't have language for it, and it dismisses most of them completely, which is frustrating because they're often the most demanding days of all. They're the days that take the most, that ask the most, and leave the least visible evidence of having been survived. The endurance day is not a day where recovery is possible. Endurance day is not a day where building is available. It's a day where the circumstances are simply difficult, and the only question is whether you can move through them without going bananas in the process. An illness that isn't responding to anything. A family situation that has no resolution available. A grief that shows up regardless of what was planned, and you just have to get through it. a work crisis that requires presence and navigation, but no amount of effort will produce any kind of outcome. On these days, that grading system looks for evidence of progress and finds nothing. And so it delivers the verdict. You suck. But holding on through a hard day is not nothing. Holding on through an endurance day is a massive accomplishment. Coming out on the other side of a sustained, difficult period with yourself and important relationships still intact, with your health not further damaged by neglect on top of everything else, with your capacity to function still present and available, that is a win. That is a massive accomplishment, but the grading system has no column for that particular day. So listen to me. We're reframing. That is a flaw in the grading system, not in the day. Now, most people have encountered some, version of the message that not every day needs to be productive, right? I mean, most people get that. Rest is important. You should be kinder to yourself. You've heard it. You've agreed with it in principle. And then you go right back to feeling terrible about things that didn't produce. Because the grading system isn't running on information. It's running on something way more persistent. Because it's running on fear. Part of what keeps it running is a fear that it is worth paying attention to. The fear that without the metric, you'll drift. That the standard is what is keeping you moving. And that without it, you'll become someone who rests every day by calling it recovery, who avoids every challenge by calling it an endurance day, who never builds anything because building is always optional and optional things are easy to defer. And that fear is understandable. It is also, though, for most people who hold it, not born out of experience. Because building days don't disappear just because you stop forcing them. They emerge when the conditions are right. And the conditions are right way more often when recovery days have been genuine and not halfway. And when the endurance days have been survived without adding additional damage. But underneath the fear of drifting is a more personal voice. It is a voice, and most people, if you sit with it honestly, you know exactly whose voice this is. That decided at some point you were only as valuable as what you produced. And everything else is indulgence. That struggling is weakness. That response to difficulty is to push harder. Not to acknowledge that the difficulty is real and that real difficulty has a cost. The voice installed the grading system. You know whose voice it was. It's not for me to tell you. It could have been a father. It could have been a grandfather. It could have been a boss. It could have been a teacher. It could have been someone on television. But somewhere early, that grading system has been running forward ever since in a context that is entirely different from the person that created it. The demanding parent, the high-pressure school, coach, early work environments, these things are gone, often by decades. But that message is installed like software, running, producing verdicts every day about whether you measured up. As though the thing it was measuring still existed. The thing it was measuring you against still existed. Naming where it comes from doesn't silence it, by the way. You may be thinking of a particular message that you heard. That won't silence it. Naming it does something, though. It changes the relationship to it. Because you can begin to make that voice move from sounding like an objective reality to sounding like what it actually is, a perspective from someone else in some other time, under some other conditions, that you need to rebel against. You don't have to have an automatic claim on how you evaluate your life today based on that message. You can make it become something you hear without being governed by, something that you can notice without obeying. The other thing that keeps that grading system running, by the way, is the genuine confusion between discomfort and depletion. You have to learn to recognize not every day that is hard is an endurance day. Not every reluctance to go to work is exhaustion. The friction that comes from doing hard things that matter, the resistance that shows up at the start of a difficult project, that stuff is real, but it's not the same as genuine depletion. And here's where we have the problem, because some people will start treating it as depletion, and that produces a whole different issue. So you have to learn the practice of reading the day accurately and being honest. Everything about what I tell you 90% of the time is about self-honesty. The question is not whether the day feels hard. The question is whether it is hard in a way that responds to engagement, or hard in a way that responds to rest, or hard in a way that responds to only simply moving through it. Most people, when they turn the question honestly inward, rather than looking for the answer that gives them permission for what they already want to do, most of the time you can tell the difference. If you remove what you want to do and remove what you think you should do, the answer is right there. So the shift that I'm talking about here is not about lowering your standards or deciding that effort doesn't matter. It's about something considerably more demanding. The practice. Developing the ability to read what a given day is actually asking for, and spending that day in that framework, rather than defaulting to the same response regardless of what the day needs. This requires you to be very, very honest with yourself in the moment. The grading system wants a simple output. Did you win or did you lose? What I'm asking you here is considerably more nuanced. What is actually going on today? What does that mean for what's available? What does this day need from me, given what it actually is, rather than what I planned for it or what I want it to be? And when you can learn to get that reading right, something changes in the quality of the day. The endurance day met as an endurance day with this new adjusted standard from can I advance to can I just hold on? Can I move through this without making things worse? Can I get to the other side with something still intact? That day then becomes survivable in a way it simply isn't when you're fighting yourself and the circumstances. When both fights are happening at once and neither one is winning, that is a combined cost to your system. Recovery day needs to be entered without the guilt that prevents the recovery from working, without the diminished productivity attempt that produces neither rest nor output. The building day met with full engagement because you're actually restored and conditions are genuinely present produces a quality of work that grinding through depleted days will never reach. It's a return on doing the right thing for the right kind of day is substantial. It just isn't visible every single day. It accumulates. Something else happens too. As the habit of reading your day accurately develops, your days start to get more legible. It is one of these things. It's like reading. It's like playing an instrument. When you first learn to play an instrument, you have to concentrate. You have to figure out where your fingers go on the guitar strings. But after you've done it enough time, you just pick up the guitar and it's just natural. It's the same thing. You will eventually become able to recognize what days are what days much quicker and much cleaner. The signal gets cleaner. You begin to notice earlier in the day what kind of day it is, which means you can then orient toward that earlier, rather than fighting a running battle with a standard that you're never going to meet. The building days feel genuinely engaged early because you're not trying to produce the same engagement when the tank is empty. Recovery days produce actual recovery because you're not spending half of your day in argument about whether you should be working or not. And the endurance days, those are the ones that will keep coming because that is the nature of life, my friends. But they get survived with less additional damage, which means the building days that follow them begin from a higher floor. So we're not lowering the ceiling, we are raising the floor. Let the day be what it does not mean passive acceptance of everything. The endurance day will still contain moments of genuine effort. The recovery day might include a walk that restores something, but also unexpectedly produces clarity about a problem you've been unable to see from the inside of the pressure. That's okay. And the building day has its own version of limits. None of these categories are a totality. They simply describe the predominant character and the primary orientation of where you need to point your compass that day. What they protect against is the wholesale application of the building day standard to days that are not building days. And it keeps you from declaring a verdict of failure on yourself day after day after day. Because the verdict is the thing that's doing the damage. The day itself, the hard days, are a normal part of human life and always will be, and nothing about that will ever change. What changes is the additional weight that you add to the difficulty when you are measuring it as a success or a failure. The day you endured without winning is still a day you showed up for. The week where nothing got built is still a week where something happened, where you held something together, where you rested enough to make the week possible, or where you simply moved through something that needed moving through. That counts. Those are not failures. Those have always counted. So when I produced a podcast that I was not happy with, I didn't fail to produce that podcast. I can't grade it like that. What I did was I used that as an endurance day. I got through it, and then I built this one. That's the best way I can help you. Remember your days. Building days, recovery days, endurance days. Learn to recognize which is which. And you'll find that once you do that, that you have more building days than anything. Second most is the endurance days. And the recovery days are less needed if you take them properly. Let's move on to our listener question for today, which is a little outside the box. It's one that we have kind of answered before, but it's been a while. And since we have new listeners popping on all the time, I figured we'd go ahead and give Daniel from Melbourne. Thank you. Coming up from Melbourne. It says, Kit, I've been reading a lot about Taoism and I keep coming across references to the I Ching. Is it connected to Taoism and is it something worth exploring or is it more of a fortune-telling thing that I should probably ignore? Daniel, I get this question actually quite a bit, and we've actually talked about the I Ching on the podcast way early in the early days. The I Ching is the book of changes. The I Ching is significantly older than Taoist texts, and I'm talking about by several centuries. But the two traditions did become pretty deeply intertwined over time. Many of the core ideas about change and cycles and movement between opposites that run through Taoist thought have their roots in the framework that the I Ching developed. So, yes, they are connected. The I Ching is something closer to what I would call a shared philosophical foundation rather than a separate system that sort of runs in parallel. It's more of what Taoism was kind of built on. As for whether it's a fortune-telling thing, that depends entirely on how it's approached. At the superficial level, yes, it has been used for centuries as a divination tool, as a way of seeking a prediction about what will happen. So yes, much like astrology relies on cycles, so does the I Ching in its own way. At its more serious level, it is something very different, though. It is a structured way of sitting with a question and being invited to consider it from an angle that you wouldn't find on your own. So, to me, and I have experience with the I Ching, of course, but to me, it is it's less about what will happen and more about what is actually present in a situation right now. And it just gives you a way of looking at it from another angle. Some people find it a genuinely useful thinking tool as a way of slowing down and approaching a problem from outside their usual framework. Other people find it a little too symbolic, a little too open to projection, a little too easy to read whatever you think you want to read into it. I think both those responses are perfectly reasonable. I do not use the I Ching. I haven't in years. I prefer to attack things from a very natural Taoist, one with nature sort of way of looking at stuff. I think if you figured out by now. But if you're curious, the most useful approach is to treat it as a contemplative practice rather than a predictive one. The question isn't what will happen, but the question should be when you get into the I Ching is not what will happen, but what does this situation actually look like when I examine it differently? If that makes sense to you and it appeals to you, I think it's worth exploration. I am a fan of all exploration. If something seems interesting, give it a shot. And if it feels like it's connective to you, just be careful that you don't let it run your decision making. It's not as supernatural as a Ouija board. It's more in line with astrology. So take that for what you will. If you want to read your horoscope, great. Just don't treat it as the be-all, end-all. I read my horoscope every day. I think it's funny because sometimes it's remarkably accurate and other times it's so wildly inaccurate that it's a good entertainment. Like today when it said my podcast was going to be great. The first one. At the end of the day today or at the end of the next day when you notice, does your Taoist assignment, by the way. When you notice yourself feeling like you fell short, Before you file it under a failure, I want you to stop and ask yourself one question. What kind of day was it actually? Today, my day, or yesterday now, as it is now 1:15 in the morning, yesterday, my day was an endurance day. My problem was I didn't realize it at the time. That's on me. Was it a building day? Was it a recovery day? Name your day without judgment about which category it landed in, and without the pressure to justify naming it to anyone, including yourself. Then ask yourself this. Given what kind of day it was, what did I do? Did I try to build on a rest day? Did I try to build on an endurance day? Did I try to rest when I had grand energy on a building day? If you built when the conditions were there for building, great. If you recovered when recovery what was needed, perfect. If you held on and endured something hard and came out the other side with yourself reasonably intact, also good. Write it down if it helps. Not as a performance review, just as an honest record of what the day was and what it asked of you and whether you met it on its own terms. My friends, life is not a competition where you're supposed to win every single day. It is a long, varied, sometimes deeply scary roller coaster, sometimes inconvenient. The exhaustion of grading every day against a standard that is not designed to meet is real, and it will wear you out. It's not easy to put down. The system that was installed a long time ago is up to you to delete. The verdict at the end of the day is something you are generating, not something that the day produced. And the verdict can change. Not through pretending that hard days weren't hard, but through giving them the accurate name. Endurance, recovery, holding of something that needed to be held rather than an inaccurate one. Not every day is for winning. Some days are for holding. Some days are for resting. And when that next building day arrives, you will have the energy in the tank to build something incredible. I hope this found you on the right kind of day. Pass it on to somebody that might need it and send it in if you have a question. Conversations worth having always start with interesting questions. I thank you for being here. Don't forget, we have all kinds of stuff on the website for you. That's dawananda.org, DAOANANDA.org or .com. There is an opportunity for you to have some private guidance if you so wish. Since you guys asked for it, we've made that available to you. And you can meet us over on Patreon, absolutely free. It's patreon.com/TheModernTaoist.
Thanks for listening to The Modern Taoist with Kit Man. Join the free Patreon community at patreon.com/TheModernTaoist and subscribe to the podcast for new episodes every Tuesday and weekend Taoism check-ins every Friday. Visit the website at dawananda.com and don't forget to like and follow us on whatever platform you find us.